Hey everyone, Crisis here. Jason Todd, the second Robin, reborn as the Red Hood, is a character with whom I've had a pretty complicated relationship with as a reader. It's safe to say that by now I've read pretty much all of his pre-Crisis, post-Crisis, New 52, and current continuity appearances. Second only to Nightwing, Jason's the member of the Bat family that I try the hardest to both understand and as well keep up with. This being in spite of the fact that, since his return to life in Judd Winnick's Under the Red Hood story arc, expertly adapted into the renowned animated feature, I and many others have grown increasingly frustrated with Jason's progression, or lack thereof, as a character. This video will be less so about the debatably aimless direction of his literal adventures, bouncing from magic to man on the run or Dark Trinity member. Rather, I'll be attempting to explain Todd's repetitive and non-committal history with the Batman and the Bat family, his morality, and equally intangible character arc. To do so, however, we'll have to trace Jason Todd's story all the way back to the beginning. Being created in 1983 before the universe rebooting events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, Jason was initially a carbon copy of Dick Grayson, son of acrobats murdered by a criminal, this time the newly invented Killer Croc, taken in by Bruce as a crime-fighting ward. This primordial version of Jason Todd would face various trials, having to earn the mantle of Robin from the first holder of the title, Grayson himself starting his path toward forging a new identity. The second Robin's arc would consist of grappling with the legacy of his predecessor, inheriting the burden of the first Boy Wonder's villains as an example. Even as early as this, at least at a meta-contextual level, Jason was set up for failure, with his sole identifying trait being his having to live up to Grayson's example, while at the same time being an unapologetic derivative of said template. Possibly seeing the inevitable issues this may cause at a creative level, the writers of the time took the opportunity given by the epic 1985 reboot, crafting a new and unique origin for Jason Todd. Now orphaned by his drug addict stepmother and criminal father, the wayward youth would be brought into the fold by Batman, hoping to harness the rage and pain of the young boy into tools for justice. In post-Crisis, early on, one would still be hard-pressed to draw much distinction from the two Robins, forcing writers to lean on Jason's darker traits. This culminated in the pages of Batman 424. In the issue, a woman in an abusive relationship sees no way out, with her abuser walking free due to his position as the son of a powerful diplomat, leading Jason to assault the man on a fire escape, with the monster falling, or perhaps being pushed. Fans of the book didn't take kindly to this brand of Boy Wonder, feeling as though he'd be written too dissimilarly to the original, bratty, rebellious, and apparently bloodthirsty. Thus, editorial put it to a vote, with Jason being executed in the Death in the Family story arc, attempting to save his blood mother from the Joker. This, however, is all simple preamble. Where Jason's story and overall character arc become really interesting is in his life after death. In the wake of Superboy Prime's reality-altering punch, Jason would rise from his grave, being found and rejuvenated by Talia al Ghul and her Lazarus Pit. With additional training and having experienced the trauma of his own death, Jason would become the Red Hood, reinterpreting the identity initially held by his own killer. Todd would return to Gotham, not to kill Batman, but to force him into avenging him, to take the Joker's life, to break his one rule. After a murder spree attempting to usurp the powers that be as the ruler of Gotham's underworld, Red Hood and Batman find themselves locked in a gut-punching exchange. Batman explains that, while he'd often fantasized his taking of Joker's life, he tells Jason that if he were to ever kill, he could never stop. Jason just doesn't understand. If he can pick and choose who deserves to die, why can't Bruce? Regardless, the father and son are separated in an explosion, seemingly adding Red Hood to Batman's expansive rogues gallery. Given his second chance, Jason wouldn't just stop at complicating Bruce Wayne's life. He'd show up in New York at a time when Nightwing called the city his home, offering his predecessor partnership, all the while murdering any criminal he comes across. If Batman couldn't be convinced, maybe Grayson could be. After all, as Todd points points out, Nightwing recently allowed the villain Blockbuster to be killed, not far off from Jason's own approach in his opinion. Disgusted, Grayson clashes with his younger brother, eventually siding with him against a common foe. With this story's conclusion seeing Jason extend an olive branch, a written letter expressing his desire to always remain a family. Next, and very interestingly, we find Red Hood undergoing a multiversal adventure, meeting a version of Bruce Wayne who seemed to fulfill Jason's desires. After his Jason was killed, this Batman systematically took out his villains, even those belonging to other heroes' rogues galleries. You'd think Jason would be elated by this, yet he sees the damage this has done to Bruce, referring to this version of his mentor as heartless. Despite this, the two would team up to tackle the crisis facing this world, with Jason watching as this version of Batman is killed. Just then, a version of Joker from another dimension shows up to mock the death of his bitter rival, with Todd surely cathartically crushing his head with a rock. After this, surely Jason would undergo massive change and growth. Not only did he witness firsthand the downside of a Batman that kills, proving that his goals in Under the Red Hood were misguided, but he also managed to finally get a kind of revenge on the man who took his own life. But nah. Bruce's apparent death in Final Crisis leads him to again go to war on all criminals, attempting to murder Damian Wayne, Tim Drake, and the guy he recently asked to always see him as a brother. This apparently being a result of Wayne's posthumous message to Jason, apologizing for all the harm he caused him, asking him to come back into the fold, and offering psychiatric assistance. Jason just takes all of this first-hand experience and kindness, and instead reverts right back to where he was after he came back to life. In my mind, this is where the problem really started, but we're nowhere near over. After his loss to Nightwing in Battle for the Cowl, Red Hood would re-emerge, now trying to use social media to galvanize the public against Dick Grayson and Damian Wayne's approach to crime fighting, still pursuing deadly means in his war on crime. Grant Morrison and artist Philip Tan do something really interesting here, using the same context and even art evoking the Killing Joke, with Grayson's Batman again offering Todd a chance to come back to the Bat family, all mirroring the end of said Alan Moore story. Jason admits that he knows it's too late for that despite all his efforts, the world simply broke Todd beyond repair. This is the same thesis ultimately applied to the Joker and his relationship to the Dark Knight, with Morrison setting up Jason as the Joker to Grayson's Batman. This status quo could have really worked, in my opinion. The proposition at the center of Killing Joke is that Batman and Joker are inextricably connected via their one bad day, each suffering great tragedy only to be pushed into opposing paths. This idea to me is even stronger when embodied in the two Robins, forged by the same man, informed by many of the same experiences, with the trauma endured by one simply pushing him too far. Keep this brief characterization of Red Hood, this glimmer of hope, in the back of your mind until the end of the video. From here on out in post-crisis, things would actually look bright for Jason, who would team up with Grayson and Damian, agreeing not to kill, further fighting alongside the return-to-life Bruce Wayne, with each of them promising to leave the past behind them and forge a stronger future. This future, unfortunately, being the New 52. In this time, Jason begrudgingly fights alongside the Bat Fam, swearing not to take lives during the durations of their various team-ups. His own solo adventures withstanding, with Jason even being invited into Batman Incorporated. After death of the family saw everyone attacked by the Joker, despite being on rocky terms, Jason and Bruce hug it out and seem closer than ever. It appears that the gap between Todd and Wayne has closed. However, after the death of Damian Wayne at the hands of his evil clone, Bruce would manipulate Jason into returning to the site of his death, hoping to trigger any memories of his resurrection to be used in bringing Damian back. This would dispel any goodwill garnered thus far, with the two trading blows and Red Hood leaving his devastated dad alone in the desert. Despite this, Jason again joins the Bat family in rescuing Batman from Apocalypse, aka Darkseid's domain. A pretty ride or die move if you ask me for the guy who just got disenfranchised. Then Bruce, now an amnesiac, hugs it out with Jason, happy that Wayne is finally free of the burden of Batman. After regaining his memories, Batman entrusts Red Hood with infiltrating Black Mask's organization under the condition that he not kill anyone. However, Jason learns that his dad, who's still alive now, was forced to take the fall for the Penguin back in the day, essentially robbing Todd of a proper upbringing. This leads Jason to shooting Cobblepot in the face, breaking Batman's rule. The two fight, the Dark Knight savagely beating his former protege, decreeing that the Red Hood is done for. Jason's then saved by Bizarro, his friend at the time. By the way, Jason never tried to kill the Penguin. He shot him with a blank on purpose just to sort of shake up Gotham's underworld. So take that for what it's worth. This forces Todd into another interesting and new potential status quo. He's not allowed back in Gotham, with Bruce eventually telling him as much. He has to carve his own path until Jason comes back to Gotham. He just can't help himself but try to bring down Penguin's operations. Batman, of course, shows up to try to stop this. Fortunately for the Ward, though, he points out that the Dark Knight arresting Jason Todd would draw too much suspicion to Bruce Wayne, causing Batman to begrudgingly leave Jason to his own devices. He then logically, yet incorrectly, pegs Red Hood as the leader of Leviathan, an organization responsible for crippling the intelligence agencies around the world. A chase ensues, with Jason giving everyone the slip. Around here is where we would get 3 Jokers, however that book is a part of DC's Black Label and has been outright referred to as out of continuity, and therefore not a part of Jason Todd's canonical history. I don't want to see any comments about 3 Jokers. Despite being wrongfully pinned as Leviathan by Batman, Jason still comes to his aid in Joker's war against Gotham's heroes. After that, still trying his best not to kill in Gotham, Jason, in a moment of weakness, shoots a criminal, leaving a boy without a family. Effectively, Todd's created another him. Batman and Jason, of course, fight over this, with Red Hood breaking down over the situation. After exposure to the opposite of Scarecrow's fear gas, a hallucinogen forcing one to experience their deepest desires, we see that Jason most wants to retire his use of firearms and to be embraced fully by the ones he loves. Batman, in turn, wishes he could bring himself to kill the Joker, removing the very thing which has wedged a gap between himself and Jason. These 6 issues, to me, have done the most to push Red Hood's character into a satisfying direction since Morrison's handling of him. He still thinks there are criminals that don't deserve to live, but it won't be by the means of a gun, what took the lives of Bruce's parents. Once again, it seems like the two are heading for a path of redemption. Guess what happens next? In a modified batsuit, Jason begins using a crowbar in lieu of firearms, teaming up with Nightwing, who immediately trusts that it wasn't the real Jason, who seemingly committed a murder. The two defeat Clayface, brothers in arms, with Red Hood later working to fight alongside zombified versions of Batman villains, hoping to do some good and steer them into a better direction, which is what the book wants us to believe is true for Jason as well. A villain seeking redemption, up until Bruce thinks Jason is in dangerous territory. The two fight, with Jason ranting about how Gotham's his city too, and how he's just trying to do some good. Batman again leaves him to his own devices, until Todd decides to steal from the Batcave. In contrast to the team-up they just had, Grayson does not trust Jason, and they all have a big fight. 2 back-to-back contradicting narratives, arbitrarily generated just so DC can send Jason back into murky waters. Managing to slip away, Jason eventually fakes his death to finally kill the Joker, only waiting to do so now for some reason as opposed to immediately, using guns again and his old suit, completely ignoring everything he narratively and emotionally gained in urban legends. Red Hood parades around Gotham and is currently hunting the Clown Prince, while a Joker copycat is also in the mix. In events set after this, inexplicably, Jason is allowed to eat dinner with the Bat family in Wayne Manor, despite all the times Batman said Red Hood wasn't even allowed in Gotham, or the fact that Batman wanted him brought to justice just prior. Now Batman is off the deep end, fighting the entire Bat fam sans Damian, with future promises to change Red Hood forever. I've heard it all before, and I'll believe it when I see it. This is pretty much the gist of Jason's arc over the years, and I hope my cause for frustration now seems justified. To me, the greatest glimmers of hope were when the writers made any kind of attempt to commit the character to one thing or another, either as an outright villain, too damaged to be redeemed, as was the intention behind his resurrection in the first place, or as someone who could return to the light and eventually forego the killing. The long and short of it is, Jason is simply too damn popular for his own good. His appearance appearances in film, as well as in Arkham Knight for example, have cemented him alongside the most iconic fixtures in Gotham. However, the story is always the same. There's a reason that Under the Red Hood keeps getting mined for inspiration pretty much whenever Jason shows up in another medium, because not since then has the character been driven by such a defined and definitive purpose. Will he learn that a Batman who kills isn't a good man at all? No. Will he be the rival, the other side of the coin to Dick Grayson? Nope. Will he instead be a trusted ally to his brothers and sisters? Not really. Will he be an outlaw, removed from Gotham and Batman's authority over morality? No. Will he ever stop using guns? Not gonna happen. Well, no and yes. He's all of these things and none of them at the same time. It's a lot like Loki in the MCU. He was created to be a villain, sympathetic for sure, but a genocidal monster nonetheless. But it's that sympathy and likability offered by the performance that allowed the character to be redeemed. This is because you can't have a madman actually be any kind of main character for very long. If Loki was acting like he was in the first Avengers movie during Thor Ragnarok, he would just be imprisoned or beat up immediately, or would just become the villain of the movie. He simply couldn't be that evil and be on the board for very long and it also make sense and be satisfying. Neither Loki or Jason Todd would be sustainable if they never grew beyond their initial purpose, unless they went all in making him Nightwing's Joker or something. Unlike Loki, Jason's been unfortunately pigeonholed by his own success. If Jason really learned, if he was ever truly redeemed in the eyes of the Bat family, the intrinsic draw and identifiable quality separating him from his predecessor would be lost. If he wasn't a killer or a gunman, if all he did was beat criminals with blunt instruments while cracking irreverent jokes, he'd be back to being just a Dick Grayson clone. He can't afford to learn from his mistakes, fulfill his own dreams, because that's not what made Under the Red Hood compelling, and it's not what made the Arkham Knight the center of edgy TikTok edits either. At the same time, however, despite the various attempts throughout the years, Jason can't be allowed to regress into being an indiscriminate villain either. When taken to its logical conclusion, Red Hood would just immediately kill the Joker. But he can't do that because that character stars in the most profitable R-rated movie of all time. DC isn't going to just stop putting Joker in their books for the sake of giving Jason a sensible character arc. Red Hood can't just be the Punisher, we can't do that either because putting him on the cover of team-up books prints more money. If his arc was more consistent, there'd be zero justification for any Robin, Batgirl, or Batman to ever trust or work alongside Jason at all. It gets even worse considering that between every one of these realizations, Jason just murders criminals left and right. It's not like he has to do this to survive the situation, he's just going out of his way to do so. Why is he not in Arkham? Bruce Wayne's childhood best friend has taken less lives and is sent to prison every time. Why is Tim Drake, as an example, even associating with Red Hood at all? He murders people all the time and doesn't feel bad about it. Many people view Jason as an extension of a power fantasy, that being the desire to see Batman rid the world of the monsters he instead cages over and over. That's probably what people think until they actually read Red Hood comics. He faked killing Penguin. He waited 20 years of comics to even try to kill the Joker, while for some reason taking out random goons. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like in the Snyderverse, if Batman's killing just random warehouse fodder that probably have like family in the hospital and they're desperate or something, then why is the Joker still alive? To hopefully make my point even more, let's look at a couple of other members of the Bat family. Grayson, raised in Batman's shadow, sought to carve his own path as a hero, becoming a great leader and combatant in his own right. His evolution is apparent, literally becoming Batman to prove he's just as capable of a hero. His story is one of self-discovery, forging yourself through fire, while still having the heart to smile. Barbara Gordon was, just like Jason, scarred by personal tragedy, instead using it to forge an even more powerful persona as Oracle, now applying her unequaled intellect to assist every corner of the DC universe. Even her becoming Batgirl again, while a less inspiring role than Oracle in my opinion, her surpassing her physical limitation in order to walk again at least presents a clear and identifiable theme. As for Jason, what's the theme? He's a Frank Castle wannabe, he learns his mistake, kills Joker, wants to be embraced by his loved ones, only to inexplicably instantly fall back into his old ways, fight his family, commits himself into being a fully fledged villain, does another 180, earns Batman's trust, they break up, they hug, they break breakup. Jason doesn't kill, then he does, then gives up guns, then uses them again, tries to kill Joker, fights his family again, breaks up with Batman over and over and over and over. Are we supposed to believe he's psychotic? That's kind of where we're at with how consistently inconsistent his portrayal has been. To advance the character, Red Hood would either lose his individual and inherent purpose, becoming an interchangeable Gotham City crime fighter, or he'd need to live up to his initial design, actually take out the supervillains, show the heroes that they're half measures if that's what he believes, but it won't happen. Red Hood is absolutely a victim of his own success and the success of other more popular characters, only managing to narratively scrape by through various false starts and broken promises. It's almost poignant that way, like maybe he's just supposed to be some guy stuck between his hopes and his urges. That's wishful thinking, I fear. In reality, he's an outlaw without a cause, a Batman villain allowed at sleepovers, until the day when DC commits to making Red Hood either the villain, the fallen son of the Batman which he was designed to be, or a hero who made his way back from the darkness, crawling out of the grave and into a better tomorrow. I'll be here just watching history repeat like I'm goddamn Dr. Manhattan.